Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful pollen-covered neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests coming to you today. First up, Rayne Lacko will be here to celebrate her YA title, The Secret Song of Shelby Ray. And later in the show, Ruth Spiro will be joining us again to celebrate two picture books, How to Explain Climate Change to Your Adult, and a board book, Baby Loves Meteorology. Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Hey families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. Join us right now from the great state of Washington, where it is sunny and everybody is smiling. We're celebrating a new YA title today. It's called The Secret Song of Shelby Ray. Please welcome to the show, Rayne Lacko. Hey, Rayne, how are you?
Hi, nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. Rayne and I just had a lovely conversation about middle school gym teachers and the weather and a whole lot of things. But we didn't talk about The Secret Song of Shelby Ray at all. Please tell me what this book's all about.
Well, it's a upper YA. My character is 18 and she's just graduated from high school. And she's had an unusual experience. She's discovered that she can hear music inside people when she touches them. And she doesn't necessarily like that at first.
That's an interesting premise. So if I shake hands with Shelby, she could hear music coming from me?
Yeah, not just music, but your authentic sound, your deepest secrets, what you're feeling, what you're thinking, who you are. She understands, she gets the whole picture right away. And so she gets to tell where you are in the moment, but also who you've been. And so it's a lot. And when it first starts happening to her, it's so overwhelming to her and she has this urge to sing out the lyrics of what she's hearing. And a lot of people really don't like when someone starts speaking out their deeper secrets right to their face. And so even though a lot of people have some really, really good music inside, they don't like it. It's being seen right away like that. So it doesn't go over very well for her.
Am I right in thinking that she shakes my hand and she says, start singing, "You're really upset you're going bald and you love to eat spaghetti." And
in song form, you have a song about that inside. And she gets a hold of that. She is able to, one of the first part of the book is her wrestling with the urge to say that to your face. And she has to learn to be quiet. But for the most part, what she does is she goes, she isolates herself and she keeps herself away from people entirely. And that's a very, very lonely place for her. And so she is post high school, wondering what to do next with her life, afraid of people, thinking she's a freak. She's having mental health problems. And she gets arrested. Things go badly for her. And she ends up on the way to a counseling appointment, bumping into a famous rock star. And she's a girl who has closed herself off and is living basically within her headphones. She's found that if she listens to music all day, then she's in her safe place and she has some control. And people leave her alone when she's wearing her headphones. And so when she bumps into the rock star, she doesn't know who he is, but she knows there's something about him. There's something very, very familiar about him. And he is in a situation, there's multiple points of view in the book. So his story is also present in first person. And he is going through a situation where he is the lead singer of a very famous band, and they're doing very, very well. And he's on top of the world, except that he feels like a marionette because he is performing all of the music of his band member, who is a musical genius. And he just wants to have a solo career and he just wants to write his own music, but he is shallow and narcissistic and having a very hard time writing a song that means anything. And so when he meets Shelby, she can hear him and she knows his authentic song. And so they develop a bit of a relationship, but it's tough because they're from very different walks of life.
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds really fantastic. Just that whole ability of Shelby. I just finished listening to a podcast talking about nonverbal neurodiverse kids, and that there is evidence. The expert said that that they're able to communicate telepathy, and of course it's a very controversial thought, but there's this thought, and her thought was that this is a skill that we all had at one time before we developed language, and we let it get dormant because we don't use it, and but it's still there in people who are nonverbal.
Well, okay. Can you tell me who that is? I'd love to read more about that. That's fascinating.
I will tell you who it is as soon as we finish.
Okay, great. I'd love to learn more about that. That is really, really fascinating to me.
Let me see if I can pull it up here. Sorry, folks who are listening, but I'm just going to research it. It is a woman named. We will have to get back to you on that.
Okay, well, that's my kind of rabbit hole I'd like to go down.
But I mean, the reason I mention it is because I think a book like this, a character like you've created, it gets people, especially curious kids and people, to think that there's more to life than we're aware of. And and we're all very familiar with people who are savants and, they've never studied an instrument before, but suddenly they're a master at playing the piano without any lessons, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, though. Is there anyone who's listening, or for your own experience, have you ever listened to a song and it's given you goosebumps, or has it ever stopped you in your tracks? Or have you ever listened to a song and it said everything that you're feeling in that very moment? Have you ever looked for music to match your mood? If you're feeling sad and you want to listen to some sad music, or you're celebrating and you want to have some celebratory music. I mean, I think that every single person from a newborn infant responds to music. They, from their first lullaby in their mother's arms, I think everyone responds to music all through their life. And so in many ways, whether if you've got two people in the room, even if they don't speak the same language, they're not from the same culture, they're not even in the same age range, they can both completely appreciate a good song. And they both are music lovers in their own way. And so I think that, music is something that really, really surpasses language in many ways, because music doesn't have to have words to touch us and to move us. Mm-hmm. And we all share that. We all share that in common. That do you know anybody who doesn't like music or has never been moved by music? I don't know. It's one of those things we live with.
I hear the folks in the Taliban aren't big fans. But other than that, no, I think music has been extremely important in various parts of my life. It certainly has been a big part, especially my daughter's life. She's been music has motivated her. And I do agree that music is very moving and can really be a powerful factor in our lives. And the situation that you're painting, where this young woman is able to hear people's authentic songs, it's both fascinating and terrifying.
I agree. And that was difficult to write about because of that. But at the same time, she understands it's also a gift, and she feels ultimately like it's so simple. Of course, people have a song inside, and of course you'd want to share that with them. And to her, it becomes very commonplace and simple, but also something to hide because a lot of people don't like it. So, yeah. And go ahead.
I was going to say the way that you speak about it, it sounds as if maybe you think that this is possible, that people could be able to hear someone's song.
That's a really good question. And I don't ultimately say yes to that. On the one hand, I feel like, can we ever really know one another? Can we ever really know ourselves? And so I think that it becomes a bigger philosophical question. And if we're living life well, then aren't we constantly evolving? Isn't our song constantly being rewritten? So, and was your song as an infant the same as it is now? I mean, if you look at people who have Alzheimer's, music therapy is extremely helpful. And oftentimes people who are, have later stage Alzheimer's and maybe are immobile and no longer speaking, when they are played music from teenagers who absolutely identify with music. Our friends like the same bands as us. We wear our band T-shirts. We, find friends because of our music that we have in common. And there are just songs that light up our lives and are part of our memories. And so when people who are, 70, 80 plus and really struggling with dementia, playing those songs can give them up to 2 to 4 hours of body movement and making them verbal again. I mean, just hearing the poignant songs of our lives that have become part of us can wake us up even when our brains are damaged. Mm-hmm. And so I think about, again, going back to the question. So we have those songs our whole lives that are so incredibly poignant and part of us, but also we're constantly evolving. So I don't know. Does everyone have a song, or they have a soundtrack of their lives? We all have a soundtrack.
Yeah, it could be. Boy, I tell you, mine would be the most eclectic soundtrack ever.
That's great.
I've had very different stages where I was into very heavy metal and Hendrix and then reggae and then Christian music, and it's just crazy.
I'm right there with you. I feel the same way. And people, because of the book, often ask me my favorite song. Like, okay, I don't have a favorite song. I'm the same with you. I am all over the radio. I am all over the different genres and in Apple Music. I'm all over the place. And there are certain songs that really, really lift me up, and that can completely change genre from day to day.
Yeah. My wife and I went to the Dominican Republic to celebrate my godson's wedding, and a song came on that was by a very big, very famous Mexican band, and I turned to my wife and I had her come up and dance, and I goes, "This is Mana. Come on, let's dance." And she's like, "How do you know that's?" Listen to it all.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
I love how much you travel. It's really, really nice.
We're very blessed to be able to travel, and I really, if folks are out there and they're wondering and they're afraid to travel, just go for it. It's going to a place, that is new to you, where you might not speak the language or you might not speak it fluently, makes you feel a little bit vulnerable, but that's okay. Some really wonderful things can happen when we're vulnerable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's really important to experience different cultures, but also to get out of your comfort zone. And the world is a big and beautiful place, and there's just so much to see and discover. I think travel is probably the best investment. Travel and animals. I love pets as well.
Yeah. Well, was there one thing that inspired this story?
The original idea that I had was that she spoke entirely in song lyrics, because I feel like there is a song for everything, for every moment. And when I originally began writing it, that's how I was writing it, but that's kind of a copyright nightmare, so that didn't stay. But even still, right now, there's a lot of song title Easter eggs all through it, because there's a lot of times where the characters use song titles as dialogue, and so there's a lot of little tricks and little games to little song titles and stuff to find in the book.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was reading on your website that you're an expert in social emotional learning, and you've been helping lots of folks. And I'm imagining, I think most people, they equate SEL with little kids and teaching them how to get along in preschool and whatnot. But an 18-year-old, 21-year-old, they still have a lot of social emotional learning to do.
I'm with you on that. And, I write nonfiction. I write social emotional learning journals for young people. My first nonfiction book was A Song for the Road. It's also a music themed novel, much the 14-year-old protagonist in that one, but definitely has some SEL themes to it as well. But I will say this. SEL, when it's done correctly and done well, is for a community. So it should include all ages. And so for students that are learning SEL in school, it really works best if it includes everybody, all the staff, all the teachers as well. SEL is for the community, because the point is for us to be able to communicate and care about one another's feelings and be empathetic. And that isn't just, peer-to-peer students. That should be with their teachers and with the staff as well, and with parents. I mean, the relationship between students is wonderful and very important in the class, but how kids relate to their parents and how their parents relate to kids, teachers to parents, it's a whole community thing. And one thing I've found is that a lot of social emotional activities are so fun to do, and they kind of span all ages. And as I was working on my thesis for my master's, the psychologist I was working with, I was making activities for students that were K to grade 5, and so many of the ones that I made, she ended up using in her anger management class with adult males. And so they were fun, interesting, creative projects that kids enjoy, but she found that they were really useful for adults who have anger issues. So, and it's the same activity, it's just a different audience. And so, yeah, I don't think SEL is for kids. I think it's for the community.
Yeah. Boy, I wonder how angry those guys in the anger management class would be if they found out they were doing a third grade SEL project.
Again, it's just like music, with Alzheimer's patients liking what they listened to as a teenager. I think that there is that, I don't know, maybe there's that just child inside of us that is untouched and innocent and wants to play at all times, you know?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. I made a living doing educational magic shows for 35 years and still perform today. One of the things that always made me chuckle was when I was hired by a school district and I would go into a high school or some of a middle school in an inner city, and the principal would look and see the colors and the whatnot and think, oh, this guy's going to get eaten up. Oh my, these kids, you know, and I would get in there and we'd start to play, and you know, the kids who the teachers were terrified of suddenly became childlike again.
Right.
And that was just so, and
And isn't that desire just always there, but we're not even conscious of it?
right, yeah. I love it. I love it. One of the things you and I talked about beforehand is what we like to do here at Reading with Your Kids, which is to encourage families to continue to read together as their kids become independent readers and grow. And if they're not reading aloud together, to definitely co-read. And I think that Secret Song of Shelby Ray would be a wonderful book to co-read together. What kind of conversations do you think families could have if they were co-reading and sitting down and chatting about it over dinner or a barbecue?
Well, I mean, the kind of conversation we're having right now about what kind of song is inside someone is a absolute first step, I would say. But there's a lot of discussion within the book, or is it the story follows Shelby's mental health. Mm-hmm. And she is doing the best that she can, and she has a few setbacks in her life. But, you know, there's a really, I think that there was a lot of conversation around support and about what is good support, what is helpful for someone who's struggling. And there's a lot of answers in different formats in the book as far as, are you eating the right things? You know, sometimes our mental health is really affected when we have nutritional deficiencies, or we're not getting enough food. You know, those types of things are I think a conversation adults can have with their children. But what I think also, there's a lot, she hangs out with a band, and it's a party house. And so there's definitely ability to have a conversation around drug use and premarital sex, and making healthy choices for oneself and what that means. Being independent, there's opportunities for her to figure out where she wants to live and what she wants to do with her life. Those are some really, really big questions and scary questions for, you know, people who are graduating from high school. There's a lot to cover in there. And along the way, the people who were originally going to be Shelby's counselors really become stand-in parents for her. And I think there's an opportunity there to have a conversation about what an 18-year-old or a teenager going up past graduation needs from their parents. What is a good parent to someone who's 18? What does that 18-year-old need? What does someone who's starting out and transitioning into adulthood need from parents? Because, you know, some ways we always need our parents, right? You know, we can be 40 and still need our parents. But at that age, it's a great time to take inventory, because you don't need them to tie your shoes and drive you to school, and you don't need them to tell you what to do, and you don't want them necessarily to tell you curfews. So how best can an adult love their child at that age, and what does that child want? I think that's not what the book is about, but I think that conversation could come out of it for sure.
I know lots of parents who need that conversation.
Well, I'm one of them, honestly. I've got an 18 and 20-year-old, so I'm in it.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to sit back and to say, you're an adult. You get to, you know, as Dr. Laura used to say, here's the pink slip to your life. You get to make your choices. But of course, on the other hand, it's incredibly difficult when our kids are making choices that we think are poor or dangerous, and we want to step in and help them. But Boy, it's a tightrope.
It is a tightrope. It really is. And where I'm learning, I mean, whatever I know about social emotional learning kind of goes out the window with my own children because I get to, it's hard to see the forest for the trees with their own kids. But what I'm learning is that they really want to make the mistakes that I'm trying to stop them from making. They want to find out for themselves. They do. And so there's so many times where my husband and I will be giving advice and trying to steer them away from, what the next 10 steps that we can see because we've made those mistakes over and over again in our own journey. And they don't want to hear it. They actually want to go out there and experience things for themselves. And, my son recently had a traffic accident and everybody was fine, but I can see the badge of honor he has that he was in something like that. And it was, scary at the time and he came out of it okay. It wasn't his fault actually, but I can see that every time something happens and he figures his way out of it, he builds his resilience and he builds his sense of self and his feelings of competence. And so my practice right now is letting go and just changing how my parenting as well. So that's a discussion for me to be having with my kids as well.
It's not easy, but just as much, we went through. I think we're kind of getting out of it. We went through a phase as a culture here that we wanted to bubble wrap our kids and not let them experience any kind of disappointment or failure or bumps or bruises. And thankfully, we're learning that that's not healthy for our kids. They need to learn how to get up. When the consequences are a little bit more severe, we still have to, we can't bubble wrap them. They're going to make mistakes. And I think if they know that we're here when they need us, you just let me know. I'm ready to jump, but I'm not going to jump until you tell me to.
Well, I feel like we as parents are presidents of their fan club, and that's the best role for us once they get past 18.
I like that. President of their fan club. Yeah. That's pretty cool. What's next for you, from you?
That's a really good question. And I have been thinking about that for quite some time. I like to teach. I'm going to be teaching a course over the summer for teen writers. And I lecture I'm a college professor as well, and I do creative writing. And I'm not doing that at the moment. So I'm looking for my next role as an instructor. And part of me, I have a book that I've been wanting to write for maybe 10 years that has been sort of sitting in the back of my mind that is complete departure than anything else I've ever written. And so I was thinking about, it requires a tremendous amount of research to do this book. So I was thinking about going back and getting a PhD. And I don't know, that's stepping out of my comfort zone in a huge way. And I have to wonder if that's like the next path. So I am like Shelby in that I feel like I'm at this transition in my adulthood where what am I doing next? What am I investing in? Who am I? What do I want? And so, I don't know. It's going to be a big thing. I mean, I've written 2 nonfiction books about social emotional learning, 2 fiction books. And so I feel like I'm in this what's next situation where I need to evolve. And I don't know, there's going to be some kind of growth, and I'm kind of in the thick of it, of figuring that out. So I don't know.
Did spending so much time with Shelby help you realize and see that, I'm not sure where I want to go right now in my life?
I'm proud of how Shelby grew. When I first wrote the original draft, it was a long time ago. I put that book aside. Shelby's been with me for longer than you might imagine. When I first started writing the first draft, my oldest son was in kindergarten. He was 4. Okay. And so I wrote it and then I put it aside, and I didn't really pull it out until a couple of years ago. But here's what's wild, that my son was very young, and I wrote the whole book, and I had the outcome, and I knew what Shelby was going to be doing. And last year he was in freshman year at University of Washington, and he really loved it there, but he just never really found what his major was going to be. And the whole time he was so stressed about figuring out what he's going to do with his life. And the way that he always dealt with his stress was to make music. He would, play the piano. He would make beats. He would, he's into rap and he would into making digital music. So that's how he burned off his stress. And so by the end of the school year, my husband and I both said, okay, enough is enough. Just follow your heart and do what you love. So now my son is literally in Los Angeles at audio engineering school, which is ultimately something that, this is a spoiler, but ultimately something that Shelby chooses. And when I wrote that when he was 4, I had no idea that the year that book would actually come out, that my son would be in that situation as a young adult. So that's kind of crazy.
Wow, it's
so
a little clairvoyance there.
Yes, I don't know. It's pretty interesting.
Very cool. Well, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about the secret song of Shelby Ray and find out more about you.
All right. People can always visit my website, raynelacko.com, RayneLacko.com. You can also find me on Instagram at the same name, at Rayne Lacko, RayneLacko. And I love talking to people about books and reading and music. So drop me a line, and I'm always happy to have a conversation about any of those things or social emotional learning.
Awesome. We've had a really great time speaking to the author of The Secret Song of Shelby Ray. It's a new YA title from our guest, Rayne Lacko. Hey, Rayne, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by The Mystery of Mystic Mountain, a great middle grade novel by Janet Fox. Becca Soloway's perfect summer goes up in smoke when her mom flees a looming divorce by dragging Becca to a Montana resort. To make matters worse, her mom's hasty booking lands them not at a luxury spa, but at an aging dude ranch called Far Away. Becca is miserable until she meets the wrangler's son, John, who shows her what might be the first clue to a century-old mystery, the lost treasure of a Robin Hood-like outlaw known as Pearl Handle Pete. You and your kids are going to love this book, The Mystery of Mystic Mountain by Janet Fox. It deserves a place in your family library. My friends, if you have ever thought about owning a business that's fun, rewarding, and makes a valuable contribution to kids' education, well, Brooklyn Robot Foundry is calling your name. I recently met Jenny Young. She's the founder of Brooklyn Robot Foundry. And let me tell you, she is incredible. Her passion for getting kids excited about STEAM, that's STEM plus art, it's contagious. I'm telling you. This isn't your average kids program. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is all about hands-on, screen-free STEAM fun. These kids get to build a different robot each class and take it home with them afterwards. Kids love it. Parents are raving about it. And now you can own a franchise and bring this incredible experience to families in your community. Now, this isn't your typical franchise. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is a mobile, flexible business with a deep curriculum that's making a real impact in schools and communities around the country. Franchise owners get a proven curriculum, full training, and support from a passionate team. So what are you waiting for? Please visit bit.ly/RobotJed. That's bit.ly/RobotJed. And let them know you heard about it on Reading with Your Kids. We are in for a treat. Joining us right now from right outside of Chicago. Our guest is returning to Reading with Your Kids to celebrate 2 great new books. First, a board book. It's called Baby Loves Meteorology, and a new picture book, How to Explain Climate Science to Your Grown-Up. Please welcome back to the show, Ruth Spiro. Hey, Ruth, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me here.
Love to have you on. Did I get the title of the climate science book correct?
Yeah, it's How to Explain Climate Science to a Grown-Up.
To a grown-up. All right. Let's start with, you were explaining to me that you're kind of, these series kind of started with the Baby Loves series. So why don't we start talking about Baby Loves Meteorology?
Sure. So Baby Loves Meteorology is the newest installment in the Baby Loves Science series. It's a board book, and it happens to be the 25th book in the series. So we have 25 and 25. So that's kind of an exciting milestone. And I do need to mention, though, that we have a new illustrator. So, and I always have to mention my illustrators of the books because they are just so phenomenal and they add so much to the books. So up until now, the illustrator has been Irene Chan, and Irene has moved on to other projects, which is understandable after 24 books. And so these new ones are illustrated by Kat Uno, and she's taken the same style, but she's given them her own look. And so it's kind of a nice refresh. And Baby Loves Meteorology is all about how do we decide what to wear in the morning when we're getting dressed? We have to look outside and check the weather. And then it goes into how weather is made. Like, what is weather? What makes it rain? And what makes a cloud? And a little bit about the water cycle. And then about predicting weather.
Awesome. How does it feel to, first off, you mentioned that the switch in illustrators. I know that typically illustrators and authors don't have a lot of direct contact in the creation phase, but did it feel different for you? Was it an easy adjustment to think, oh, I'm going to be working with a new illustrator now?
You know, I was a little apprehensive because Irene really just did such a great job. And I'm sure that when she first took the series on, she did not anticipate that, you know, several years later and 20-something books later, she would still be working on the same books. But just the fact that she was able to, for Baby Loves Hearing, she was able to draw the inner ear and make it look, you know, very understandable. And some of the diagrams that she was drawing were just so great. So I knew that she had big shoes to fill. But when I saw Kat Uno's work, she also had kind of demonstrated that same, you know, wonderful ability to illustrate things that seemed kind of complicated, but that were also very appealing to small children, because ultimately that's what we want these books to look like, right? We want them to be a book that you can hand to a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old and they're going to look at it and be drawn into it. So she did a really great job of maintaining the same feel and the same look, but also giving it all her own unique twist. And it wasn't really a challenge for me because, like you mentioned, I don't work directly with the illustrators at all. That's the art director. And just right from the start, right when we saw her sketches and her cover ideas, it just seemed like she understood the assignment and really, it was kind of seamless, at least from my perspective, it was. So she stepped right in, and I couldn't be happier with the work that she's done for this book.
Awesome. And I know you can't speak for Kat, and I don't even know if you've discussed this with her, but I'm wondering if she's sitting there thinking, all right, I'm going to get in the series. I'm going to illustrate 24 more of these books. Or if she's like, no, I don't want to be like
Well, I'm sure knowing that, you know, this is part of a long-standing series, I'm sure that's in the back of her mind that there will be, and there is, she did do a second book, which is coming out next year. And I can reveal that if you would like. That one is called Baby Loves Robotics. Okay. And that comes out just after in the new year in 26. So, you know, I'm sure she knows that there's a potential for there being more books for her to illustrate, but my guess is that, you know, just like I do, she's taking this one book at a time and just focusing on the work that's in front of her.
Now, what are some of because meteorology is a fascinating but also a complex, very complex subject. I studied it a little bit in an earth science class in college, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed kind of being a weatherman and predicting all these things. I was pretty good at it. But what kind of things are we hoping that babies kind of grasp onto?
So whenever I am thinking of what to include in the book, I like to ground it in something that is familiar to a very small child, something that an everyday observation or experience that they have. And just thinking back to when my two daughters were young, the issue was, well, what are we going to wear today? Do you need to wear shorts or do you need to wear snow pants? And in order to make that decision, you have to check the weather. And so I've always been obsessed with weather as well. My family will tell you, I love watching the news and the weather, and I'm always checking the radar. I just find it so interesting. And there is so much that goes into meteorology, and because these board books, they only have 10 spreads. So I needed to really cut it down. And the one thing that I really wanted to include, I couldn't, which is what makes wind, because that's something, that's another question. Like, you can feel the wind, but you can't really see it. Like, you can see the effect of it blowing in the trees or something, but where does that come from and what makes wind? But ultimately, these books are for very little kids. And so we need to just distill this topic down to just 10 spreads and some ideas that are very easy for them to understand. And one of those basic concepts is rain, right? We look outside, we see clouds, we'll see a dark cloud. So we know that maybe that's, so where does the rain come from? So this touches on a little bit of like the water cycle and how water evaporates and comes down, and, what it identifies a couple of different clouds. So you can look up and see, and give names to the different clouds, and, where does like snow, sleet, or ice come from? So, we decided I had a lot of material to choose from, but my editor and I, as we went through everything, we kind of whittled it all down to what is the one idea and the one observation that very small children would be familiar with and they would be able to connect to. And so we decided that really it was that idea of clouds and precipitation. And that's what we ended up with it, yeah.
Me and my beautiful wife had a tour back in the fall of Ireland and Scotland, and so we didn't know what to prepare for. So we reached out to lots of people. In fact, we reached out to an Irish official at the International Children's Book Festival, and everybody told us, oh, you got to bring a raincoat, got to bring your boots, you got to bring this, got to bring the hats, got to bring the umbrella. And we got over there, and we were so blessed. It only rained one day.
I have to tell you, we had the same exact experience. My husband and I went to Ireland a year ago in June, and the same thing where I brought my waterproof shoes and my raincoat, and we just figured we'd buy umbrellas there. We had one day of rain. The rest of the days, it was like 70s and sunny. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Was that the Cork Science Festival by any chance, or was it different? It was a book festival.
No, well, we spoke to the Irish official in Bologna, Italy, at the International Children's Book Festival.
Oh, okay.
We traveled in the fall, and it's funny. We're at the Cliffs of Moher, we had this spectacular, and our tour guide said, you're really lucky. Usually, you can't see anything, and I'm like, so why do you come here if you can't?
We had the same experience. It's so funny. We had the same experience. It was a beautiful, sunny day, and we have these pictures where, everyone's like, oh, you see fog. Uh-huh. And, I wonder if this is more proof of climate change.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? So you were sharing with me before that the new series, How to Explain to a Grown-Up, kind of was born from the fans of the Baby Love series. Yes.
So the first of the Baby Love Science books came out in 2016, right? So that's what we're looking at, it's going on 9 years ago, basically. So a few years ago, we were getting emails and comments from parents and educators and booksellers who are saying, hey, the kids who have grown up with the Baby Love Science board books, they're getting too old for board books. What's next? What do you have for us? And my editor and I were, we had discussed the fact that they wanted me to age up these books. And write something with some enhanced content and more information for like early elementary ages, like kindergarten through second, third grade. And it took me a while to decide how I wanted to do that because, I know a lot of children's book authors and I know a lot of nonfiction children's book authors, and there are so many amazing books already out there that are just straight nonfiction about science, STEM topics, that I just didn't think that I wanted to dive into that and reinvent that wheel because there's so many great books that are out there. So I wanted to come up with a concept that would be a little bit different, have some humor to it, read a little bit like a nonfiction book, but have a lot of facts and nonfiction in there. So I came up with the idea of a child explaining the topic to their grown-up. And I was very, very careful not to say to your parents, to your mom, to your dad, because I know kids grow up, with all kinds of grown-ups in their lives. So they might be reading the book with an aunt or an uncle or a caregiver or whatever. So anyway, so I came up with the idea of how to explain science to a grown-up. And that empowers the child to have that knowledge and feel like they are taking control. Because honestly, parents, adults don't always know the answer to everything. And it's okay to say, you know what? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. And so, we all know those kids who will talk to anyone who will listen about all of the different dinosaurs, right? And they know all the names of the dinosaurs and they'll talk about that, at nauseum, or they might know all about Legos, or they might know all about a certain video game or soccer or whatever it is. And they love to talk about it. So I kind of base these books on that kid who just enjoys being the expert in something. And so the first book that came out was How to Explain Coding to a Grown-Up. And the next one that came out was How to Explain Robotics to a Grown-Up. And the brand new one that just came out, which I'm very excited for, is How to Explain Climate Science to a Grown-Up. And it pairs nicely with the Meteorology book because they both talk a little bit about weather. And then Climate Science talks a little bit more about how weather and climate are different and, what humans are doing to affect the climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your lead character in this series reminds me a lot of my son when he was that age. Mm-hmm. I used to say his motto is, why use one word when 50 can also be?
I like that. Yes. And they will. And that's the thing too. They know so much about, they'll pick a topic that they're just so invested in. And I've always said, if a little kid can use the word diplodocus, they can use the word meteorology or molecule or, whatever it might be. So we need to just give kids all this vocabulary because the more you give them, the more it will stick.
Yeah. Well, you gotta tell me diplodocus. I don't even know if I said it right. What in the world?
I don't know if I said it right either.
Is that a type of dinosaur?
I believe so, yes.
I believe so.
Yeah, I'll have to find a kid to explain it to me.
So I guess the question, obvious question is, can we expect a chapter book in a couple of years or a middle grade novel in this kind of? What I always say is, I don't know if I have the attention span to write something that long.
Like, I really enjoy the board book format because I have a framework of, a certain amount of spreads. I think that's what I've found that I'm kind of good at, is taking something and distilling it down to the most important, aspects. I did enjoy having more space to work with in the picture books. Excuse me. And being able to, give more of an explanation. I don't know. I may decide to try something a little bit longer for even older kids. We'll see. Right now, I'm enjoying the board book and the picture book format. So, I don't know. Well, that's to be determined, I think.
Interesting. You were mentioning, you have just a certain number of spreads to deal with your board book format. Is that how you write? Are you imagining, okay, these are the words that are going to go on spread number 1, and these are the words that are going to go on spread number 2?
So with this particular series of board books, it has kind of evolved into sort of a pattern. They all have a beginning and a middle and an end. And what I'll do is I'll start with all of my research, and then I make a list from that of the concepts that I'd like to include. And then I'll start just writing some text. Like I'll write a spread, like, okay, here's a spread that's all about clouds. And then I might write a spread that's all about instruments that are used to predict the weather, and so on. And then I actually have a book dummy format that I made in Keynote on my Mac, and it's 10 spreads. Excuse me. So it almost looks like a slideshow presentation. Mm-hmm. And then what I'll do is I'll just start taking some of this content and I'll put it into that. So I'm making a book dummy so I can see what will fit and what there's not enough room for, because we really do want to limit the number of words that are on each page to make it move along quickly, but also to allow plenty of room for the illustrations. And, we don't want to have too much on each page. Mm-hmm. But I use this framework of having this book dummy that for these, I know there's always going to be 10 spreads. So it's sort of like a puzzle for me to try to see what will fit within those 10 spreads of the content that I have. And then, work with my agent or my editor or even the art director to figure out, well, what's going to fit on within these spreads and what do I need to, what has to go.
Yeah, fascinating. I remember being in high school and getting an assignment to write a 300-word essay on on some topic, and I remember just dreading those moments. I have a feeling that it would be much more challenging to have to, address a certain topic in the board book format because there's so few words you can use. Yes.
I don't shy away from using complex vocabulary, though, because I feel like we can certainly, expose children to that. I try to make the sentences themselves very simple. Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, what was the question?
I wasn't so much a question as just an observation that I've mentioned this before. I heard John Grisham kind of poo-pooing, children.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so easy. It's like 200-word book, a 300-word book. It's so easy. But I don't think it's so easy at all. I think it's very challenging to kind of explain complex ideas with so few words.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, there's a whole area of science and communication that's called like SciComm, science communication, that's dedicated to helping scientists explain their work in terms that people can actually understand, right? Because you can speak to other people in your field and use all the lingo and, they'll understand it. But if you want to explain something to someone who's not familiar with a topic, you need to begin at the beginning, right? And not make any assumptions about what they already know. So it is really challenging to try to write, to take all of this information and then decide what's important. And again, what I do is I try to relate everything to something that a child would be familiar with. Something that, when I wrote about gravity, well, children will sit in a high chair and drop their Cheerios and watch them fall. And that's because they understand intuitively the concept of gravity. There's actually studies out of Johns Hopkins that demonstrate that babies as young as like 9 months old know if you drop something, it's going to fall. It's not going to hover in the air. So, that's something that is in my book where baby is dropping noodles from the high chair and the puppy is gobbling them up and then it gets into gravity. Or my book, one of the first ones was aerospace engineering. And that began with going to the park and watching a bird fly and wondering, how does a bird fly? Well, it's not magic, it's science, and it has to do with physics and the shape of the bird's wing. So I think that with all of these books, the way that I make them accessible and hopefully understandable is by relating everything to, you start with something that is, already understood or is familiar, and then build on that and just kind of pull back that curtain a little bit of, we feel the wind, or we hear a guitar music being played, or, we're dropping things, or we see a bird fly. What is the science that explains that, something that we see and observe?
Yeah. Neat. I love it. I love it. Tell everybody, please, where they can go to find out more about both series and find out more about you.
Sure. My website is ruthspiro.com, and I'm on Instagram, and all the information about my books is on my website. They are available anywhere that you like to buy your books. I like to support independent bookstores, but sometimes that's not always possible for everyone. They're also, at libraries, and if your library doesn't carry it, please request it, and they will probably order it for you.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Baby Loves Meteorology and How to Explain Climate Scientists to a Grown-Up. Our guest has been Ruth Spiro. Hey, Ruth, thanks so much for being back on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Rayne Lacko. Please be sure to check out The Secret Song of Shelby Ray. Also want to thank Ruth Spiro. Please be sure to check out How to Explain Climate Change to Your Adult. And Baby Loves Meteorology. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Stella Sheree. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.